Today, I'm going to teach you how to jump your mountain bike. If I had to do this all over again and learn to jump as fast as possible, how would I do it? Well, let's find out. And you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. Let's dive into today's video of how to jump. Stick around because lastly, I'll also share with you a couple of my favorite tips and techniques that I still use while jumping to this day. And these could literally be making or breaking your jumping technique. So stick around to the end and let's dive into today's video. Enjoy. First up, we have the essential skills to know before jumping. You don't just dive into the deep end of a pool not knowing how to swim. You need to understand the technique involved in swimming. Is it even safe to swim there? Is this a river? How deep is it? All of these sort of things should be racing through your mind, and exactly the same principle applies to jumping. You need to know a couple fundamental skills before you even dive into learning to jump. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for failure. The very first thing is the bunny hop. Bunny hopping has two main styles. The first one just being compressing your bike down and picking that bike up. This is incorrect. I don't want you to learn to do this, especially not if you're trying to learn to jump. The second option is where you actually lift the front wheel first and then the back wheel. This is the correct one because what happens is when you're jumping, you're actually lifting the front wheel first and then the back wheel, and you're matching the gradient of the landing. So you're matching the gradient of the lip and you're matching the gradient of the landing. So you see you'll start to do this fluid motion while learning to jump. That's what I'm looking for. I'll link to my bunny hopping video down below just so that you guys can deep dive into the technique involved to actually bunny hop, but you need to know how to bunny hop before you dive in further. Next up is bike setup. Bike setup also crucial for learning to understand how to jump. Bike setup has a couple different things. So the very first one that we're going to dive into is a shorter stem and a wider handlebar. This just offers a little bit more control and stability. Wider handlebar, definitely more stability in the air. Shorter stem, also more control. Dropper post, you want to be able to smash that saddle down and get it out the way, especially while learning to jump. You want your body to be able to move freely around and the bike to move freely around underneath you. Very important. Suspension, last one. You want to make sure that your sag is set up correctly, and probably the most important thing about jumping is your rebound. So rebound is super important. Rebound is how fast your suspension is returning, whether it's your rear shock or your fork. So very important to understand, because if it's rebounding super fast like a pogo stick, if you compress into the face of takeoff and it bucks you over the front, it can either buck you forward or buck you back. It probably has a lot to do with your rebound because it's acting like a pogo stick. You compress in and it's just rebounding straight away. General rule of thumb is when you sit on your bike, you wanted your suspension to compress down and sit straight back up into its sag. So you want it to sit down and up into its sag. You don't want to sit onto it and it bobs like this, like that. That's often an indicator that maybe it's a little bit too fast. So rather add a couple slower clicks. General rule of thumb is if I was learning to jump, I don't want to have my suspension too fast. I'd rather be on the slower side than on the faster side of that. So set your rebound up, add a couple clicks, dial it in, especially, and you'll start to feel it as you're jumping. Are you going for a little bit, getting back forward? Are you getting back? Add rebound accordingly. Next up is progression. Exactly the same analogy I used earlier, but you don't dive in the deep end of a pool and hope that you can swim. You need to learn from the ground up. So exactly the same principle applies for mountain biking. You don't want to set yourself up for failure. Start small and progress up from there. There's great options. You can learn on just a small kicker, a small little tabletop as well, and you can learn and lock in that technique before you start to progress up to other stuff as well. I'm not going to lie to you, jumping is about practice. So stuff you're going to need to go out, find a jump you're comfortable with, and do it repeatedly. You're going to do it a bunch of times and practice to get as high as possible, and just do it over and over until you feel comfortable. Your body actually needs to get used to this feeling of jumping in the air. It's quite an unnatural feeling, so it takes a little bit of practice and it takes some time on the bike actually jumping. So find something that you're comfortable with and learn to lock in your jumping technique first, and then you progress and you build up from there. As you get comfortable over a jump, you can find a little bit of a bigger jump and you progress to that one. But you don't want to dive in the deep end, hit a big gap jump and just smash your confidence to pieces. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't recommend it. Start small and build your way up from there. Next up is jump breakdown. So the breakdown of a basic jump. All jumps have a kicker, a landing, whatever happens in the middle varies. So very important to understand, some kickers might be very shallow, the landing also might be shallow, it might just be straight, and that you can just use speed to kind of jump over. And then as the jump starts to get a little bit more kicky, or you want to get a little bit more height out of it, you'll see the angle of the jump and the takeoff gets a little bit steeper. So if you ever go dirt jumping, you'll see that the jumps are more about height. So they're just wanting to try and get the height out of them. So the actual kicker becomes a little bit steeper, and people will often refer to it and say, oh, that jump had quite a kick to it, just because the takeoff was very steep. Next up, we have jumping styles. So there's multiple different styles of jumps that you're going to encounter on the trail. The very first one is a tabletop. So, where you've got a kicker, a landing, and the middle is filled in. So you can just ride onto the top of that and progress, go a little bit faster, pop over a little bit further until you're all the way to the landing. This is probably the safest, lowest risk one to learn to progress on. Next up, gap jump. Now, all of a sudden, your safety net in the middle is gone, and you have a gap to actually clear. So this is where it becomes a little bit more risky. So these ones obviously you need to progress and make sure that you're comfortable with first. But again, kicker, landing, and you will have a gap to actually cover in the middle. Depending on how big the jump is, that gap distance can always vary. Next up, you have a step up. So the kicker is below the landing, so you'll actually have to jump up to the landing. You'll have a step down, so the kicker is above the landing, so you'll jump down to the landing. You'll get a hip jump, so your lip might be straight, and then the landing might be at a bit of an angle. So you'll jump and then actually have to turn in the air in order to land onto that jump. You get a kicker only, so you'll have a kicker and you can go to the moon. You can just hit that thing as fast as you want sometimes, depending on where the kicker is. So sometimes it might just only be a kicker and you might land to flat. Who knows? A shark fin, where the actual kicker itself is at a little bit of an angle and turning, so you'll be turning as you jump with the lip. So a little bit different to a hip jump. So a hip jump, sometimes the lip will be straight and you jump and the landing will actually be at an angle. Where now the shark fin, the kicker is actually at the angle and you can be jumping to the landing. Quick one, guys, before we deep dive into the technique of actually jumping, let me know in the comments down below how you learned to jump and what are the most important things you learned about jumping during your jumping journey. Drop it down in the comments below. I'd love to know your thoughts. What did you struggle with when jumping? Maybe I can give you some feedback on that down in the comments below. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And without further ado, let's dive into the technique of how to jump. First thing you need to understand, what's happening before and what's happening after the jump. Before you get to the jump, it's very important. You need to understand, is there an opportunity to pedal? Will I have the correct amount of speed coming into this jump? All things you need to think about. Do I need to be doing a little bit of braking before I get there? Am I going too fast? What's happening after? Exactly the same thing. Do I need to land hard onto the brakes? Was this a hip jump? What's the angle of the landing? Is there a tight section afterwards? Is there a tight berm? So make sure that you know what's happening before, what's happening afterwards. You need to understand that you need to prepare before and prepare for after. Okay. Next up is technique. So the technique involved in jumping is all about your bunny hop. What you're going to do is you're going to bunny hop off the actual face of the takeoff. So coming into the takeoff, what I'm going to do is I'm riding into it, I'm compressing my bike and body into the actual takeoff itself. So I'm going to compress, preload into that face, and as I'm leaving the kicker, I'm going to use my bunny hopping technique. So I'm going to use my front wheel, then lift my back wheel. So what I'm doing is I'm compressing in, as my front wheel's leaving, I'm lifting that front wheel and I'm standing my hips upwards and exploding my body upwards, and that's how I'm going to generate height while jumping. So now that I'm in the air, what I want to do is I want to then come down. I want to try and match the gradient of the landing. So I want to try and land with both wheels at the same time. As you become a little bit more advanced, what you can do is you can land front wheel first, and that'll actually pull down your back wheel. And this is just a little bit more advanced. When you're first starting out, just make sure that you're landing front and back wheel at the same time. Next up is what to do in the air. So as you're starting to learn to jump, you're not going to really be doing a huge amount in the air. You're just kind of going to be jumping, landing, and riding from there. So as you get a little bit more comfy and you practice a little bit more, as you jump, I want you to jump, turn your bar, and then straighten it out, and then land. So this gives you something to think about. It looks a little bit stylish, and it kind of detracts from everything going on. So this is something that I wish I had known sooner. So as I'm learning to jump, just add a little bit of style. It just gives you something to think about and a little something to focus on, and it kind of avoids you dead sailoring on every jump. Another thing you really don't want to do is you never want to lock your arms and your legs out on a jump. What happens is if you lock your arms out, if you hit a jump and you lock your legs out, chances are you're going to go over the handlebars and it's going to shoot you forward. It just shows me that you're out of control. So never be locking your arms and legs out actually while in the air. It's often an indicator you might not be doing it on purpose, but sometimes if you hit something and it goes a little bit wrong, you might have got bucked forward, your rebound was too fast, you'll see your arms and legs will straighten, and you'll often end up crashing on landing. So stuff to look for. Next up is landing. So when you're actually landing the jump, like I said earlier, you want to make sure that you're landing with your both wheels at the same time. You don't want to be landing back wheel and then front wheel for this instance. As you become more advanced and you perfect your bunny hopping technique, you can land front wheel, and then that front wheel will pull that back wheel down and straighten the bike out. It's a little bit more of an advanced technique while learning match the gradient first. But as you're progressing, front wheel and then back wheel onto a jump. Okay, that's what you were looking for, especially even when you whip. So if you jump and whip and land your front wheel first and your bike's still a little bit of an angle, so that you put that front wheel down, it'll kind of guide that back wheel, straighten the bike out for you. So if you're practicing your whips, it's also just a good technique to know. Gauging of speed. Gauging your speed while coming into a jump is quite hard. You need to understand that there is no perfect speed to actually hit a jump with. So you need to be able to compensate if you're coming too slow or if you're going too fast. So if you're coming in too slow, you need to be able to bunny hop a little bit harder and higher so that you can generate a little bit more height and distance. Whereas if you're going a little bit too fast, you need to be able to scrub and actually squash that jump and stay nice and low over there. So gauging your speed comes with practice, ride multiple different styles of jumps, do it repeatedly, and you'll get a better understanding of how to gauge your speed for different jumps. If you are still unsure, best way to do this is follow a friend into a new jump. That's somebody that has hit that jump before. That's probably the best way to gauge the speed for a new jump. All right, guys, so now I'm going to give you a rider's perspective of what's happening on the actual trail itself. So I strapped the GoPro to me. I'm going to walk you through my thought process, what's exactly happening on the trail, just to give you a better idea of actually what's going on while we're jumping. So let's dive right into it. This is one of the local trails at just in Cape Town here near me. It's a jump trail as well. So you can see straight off the bat, we hit this first jump, coming into that takeoff. I'm compressing the bike into that, and straight off, I'm jumping, turning the bar, and you see how I do that little bar turn, and that actually guides, just takes, like I said, takes the mind off of things. I still do it to this day. It kind of kicks my back wheel out a little bit as well. Now you can also see that when I land my front wheel, and that the frame and the bike actually straightens up a little bit as well. So landing with my front wheel first, it kind of straightens that back wheel up. So you can see these other little jumps as well. Again, next jump, little bar turn, and this jump's a little bit of a pull, so you can see them having to bunny hop, generate a little bit of height out of that. These jumps are quite fast, so you're not having to bunny hop too high and hard over them as well. So just again, nice and flowy. This jump's a little bit bigger. You can see the takeoff's a little bit steeper, and I know that it's probably going to send me pretty fast. So now watch what happens is I shift my body weight back, so I'm trying to squash this one a little bit more, as opposed to bunny hopping and going quite high. So next thing, you can see this next jump kind of veers off to the right. And I know what's coming past there, but if I didn't know what was coming past there, it's something that I need to start being prepared for. So looking ahead, very important. So like I was saying to you in the video, when you're looking ahead, you need to make sure that you're looking far enough ahead to actually know what's coming up. Because be able to prepare for stuff like this, I don't want to jump off straight on this. I need to know that I need to jump and be turning right at the same time. So this trail kind of gets nice and fast down here. This is pretty cool. So you can see it really picks up a little bit of speed. Nice little kick over here. And here's a great example here. The rollers that are kind of just pretty far apart, so you've got a lot of speed, but watch how I bunny hop pretty hard just to make it to the other side. So obviously I didn't have enough speed, so that I knew that gauging my speed, I was going to have to bunny hop extra hard just to get over this. Just a small bunny hop probably wasn't going to cut it. I probably would have come up short. So you can see here, check my bars almost disappearing just to get over this this little jump here. So really hard on the pull on that jump, flat out around these corners as well, popping down, up and over, and now it really speeds up actually a little bit as well. So you can see now I'm trying to find all these little down slopes. Now I'm definitely not bunny hopping. Now I'm actually just like speed jumping over a lot of these jumps as well. So just trying to stay low, find the downside, squash down, compress into them to really just work and find as much downside as I can. You can see I'm even speed tucking here, getting nice and low at the bike. So hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that section. That's just a little bit of a breakdown of the mind, sort of what's going on while it's actually on the trail. I really enjoy stuff like this. I'm thinking of doing a little bit more of it in the future. And it's just to give you an idea of what's going on in the mind so that you can actually see all the stuff that I'm teaching you while it's going on while we're riding. I really hope you enjoy it. Let's dive into the next section. The bad habits and techniques of jumping. The big old no-nos. So the very first thing that you don't want to do is when you get to a jump, you never want to be braking on the takeoff. Okay, very important. Don't think I have to explain this one too much, but never be braking on the takeoff. It's going to affect your whole body position. It'll throw you for an absolute loop. Just don't do it. Next thing, you don't want to be straightening your limbs out. So often it's an involuntary thing when you straighten your limbs out. So you might jump and you might straighten out your arms, your legs, but definitely don't do it on purpose. When you're jumping, you want to have your arms nice and relaxed, your legs nice and relaxed, ready to absorb that landing. So when you come down, you're nice and relaxed to absorb that landing. So you never want to have them locked out, your arms or legs locked out. Chances are if your legs are locked out, it means you're going over the handlebars. Don't look straight down. Make sure that you're looking ahead. You want to be sort of like 2 to 5 plus meters ahead of you. You never want to be looking straight down. Subconsciously, when you're hitting the jump, you should have already, your body will start doing that. You should already be looking at the landing, preparing for what's coming up. You don't want to be looking straight down at your front wheel. Next up is casing. So casing is when you actually hit a jump and you land into the back of the landing. So you have two different styles here. You can either pick your front wheel up. So if you hit a jump and you know that you're going too slow, I'd rather pick my front wheel up so that I land front wheel up above the landing rather than dropping my front wheel and landing nose first into that landing. Because if I land nose first, it's going to throw me straight over the handlebars and often will end up a little bit worse. Whereas if I keep my front wheel up and I land into the back of the landing, chances are it's going to be a little bit better for me, and I might even be able to maybe ride it out or at least just come to a dead stop, but I probably won't crash. So stuff to think about. Next up, overjumping. Overjumping is about going too deep and actually missing the landing completely. So I'd rather overjump than case, to be honest, in my personal preference, because if you overjump, you can land too flat. It might be a violent landing, but you might still be able to hold on to it depending on how deep you've gone. But I'd rather still go a little bit too fast, overjump, than come up a little bit short. So food for thought, still something that you don't want to be doing. Again, gauging your speed, very important for these sort of things. Last thing is things on the takeoff. So looking for stuff like rocks, roots, ruts, stuff that can misdirect your wheels when you hit it. You know, if there's a rut and your front wheel tries to climb out of that rut, it's going to misdirect you in the air. Chances are it'll throw you a bit squirrely. You might crash, you might not, but stuff that you need to look for, make sure that you're looking for it on the actual takeoff itself so that you know how to prepare and maybe you can avoid it if possible. And lastly for today, we're into the bonus tips. So the stuff that I still use to this day that I think you guys will find value out of. First up, we have looking ahead. So where you're looking is also very important. You don't want to be looking straight down at your front wheel, especially while jumping. You want to make sure that even before you get to the jump, you need to know what kind of jump it is, especially if you're riding a trail blind or a jump for the first time. Make sure that you're looking ahead, scanning with your peripherals, sort of looking sort of 5 to 10 meters ahead of you, and you know subconsciously everything before that you're going to start doing. So when you're hitting a jump, you're making sure as you're leaving the takeoff, you're already starting to prep for the landing, looking ahead, whatever's happening, not looking straight down. Okay, very important, guys. Riding with people that are better than you. I cannot say this enough, guys. This is one of the best techniques that you will ever learn, is find groups of people that you can go hang out with that are better than you to learn to jump and ride with. Go to dirt jump parks. I can't tell you that when you're watching other people do stuff, you'll start mimicking their techniques. You'll start learning from them subconsciously. Like riding behind someone, you'll mimic their speed. You'll ride the same speed as them into a jump. You'll start mimicking their technique. You'll feel a little bit more comfortable, more confident. Go ride with people that are better than you. I promise you, I still do it to this day. I ride with friends that are better than me, just for this specific sake, because I feel like I'm a better rider for it. Building up. You need to understand that, you know, when you're building up to a jump, so speed checking a jump. So if I'm still riding a new jump, I'll speed check it. I'll come in. It's not something that, you know, if I just see a jump for the first time, I'll just arrive somewhere and hit that jump straight off the bat. It's something I'll still do a speed check. I'll come in, I'll check the speed. Am I comfortable? Am I confident? You know, am I going to commit to this jump or not? These are decisions that I'm actually making into this. I'll then follow someone into the jump if I feel I am ready to do this to do this jump, to take this next step. So building up to jumps, not just getting there full gung ho, because that can get you hurt. There is actually a lot of thought process that goes into hitting a jump. And until you're at a point where you're very comfortable and you know that you're comfortable with that size of jump, and I encourage you to take the steps needed to think about actually hitting that jump for the first time, not just diving in the deep end and fully committing and getting yourself hurt. Progress, build up, build your confidence, and you know, that's how you become a better rider and a better jumper for it. All right, guys, so that wraps up my how to jump video for the day. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'll pop my how to whip video on the screen for next. That's kind of the next step in progression. If you're learning to whip, you might enjoy that. Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video and you learned a lot. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought. You know, maybe if you can give me some feedback, I'd love to know what else you'd like to learn as well. And yeah, if you haven't already, please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. I'd much appreciate it. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Dave, out.